Welcome back to A Matter of Life and Maiden, the podcast of the Beast. I'm Joe Labriola.
And I'm Matt Wagner.
And today we are talking about the 7th album from Iron Maiden, the 1988 release. Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, and the only concept album by Iron Maiden.
This is, like, we kind of compared it to Somewhere in Time in the last album. It's similar, but it's, like you said, the only concept album that they've ever done. From, start to finish. It is, if you like that kind of thing, if you like this album, you're going to like the whole thing. It's going to be like your favorite album. If you don't like that kind of subject matter and that kind of sound and feel, you're not going to really like this album a whole lot.
I agree with you, man. Another thing about this album that I want to talk about is, before we get into the songs and stuff, this is a new studio. They tried, we kind of failed to mention this last time, but Power Slave and Somewhere in Time were both recorded at Compass Point Studios in the Bahamas. This album was recorded in Germany at Musicland Studios in Munich, Germany. And then I think they went to Whistle Lord Studios after that to do some more fine-tuning with some stuff and instrumentation. But, like Matt said, this is a concept album based around the ideas of premonitions, clairvoyance, and the idea of a seventh son of a seventh son, which is this basically child born of whatever who has the power to foresee his future and his destiny, and basically like this ultimate savior.
He has the power to heal.
Yeah.
He has the gift of second sight.
He is basically
the chosen one.
Yeah, he is the opposite of the Antichrist almost. I mean, it's kind of like this guy who's like this complete savior. But the thing is, the whole concept of the seventh son is a struggle between him trying to either become ultimately good or ultimately evil, and so it's like trying to
like a modern example of this story. I think would kind of be like Star Wars with Luke Skywalker, that kind of thing. Like he is a Messiah-like figure, but he has this choice of going, to the light or the dark, the good side or the evil, and that's what the song's kind of about. So, like, if you're like just listening to the song, trying to get the concept, think of like a Luke Skywalker type.
It's very interesting too because Steve talked about Doris Stokes, who was a British clairvoyant who passed away, and it gave him inspiration for writing the song. Because he questioned whether or not she could foresee her own death, and then obviously Orson Scott Card's novel, which is science fiction, it's called Seventh Son. It's about this kind of stuff too, like this chosen being or chosen child, and then he kind of combined those two things and started writing some stuff. But yeah, let's dive into the album. Let's start with Moonchild.
7 Deadly Sins. 7 Ways to Win. I mean, this is probably the most unique way an Iron Maiden album has ever opened. You kind of get this minstrel feeling. You get this acoustic guitar. You get these Bruce vocals with it. And you kind of get this feeling like this is going to be a story time. This is going to be a tale. And it sets the perfect mood for the whole album to come forward. I mean, I love Moonchild.
I do too, and like you said, I want to touch on that too. Another line that I love in the song is 7 holy paths to hell and your trip begins. It's like they're telling you, alright, this is the beginning of the album. Here comes the story. Here we go. The song and this album take heavy emphasis from Somewhere in Time. The beginning of Moonchild is an example of that. There's heavy synthesizers at the beginning of this album. Heavy keyboards. Which were all written and composed by Steve, and live, Steve's bass technician, Michael Kenny, plays the keyboards. So
he actually, fun little fact, met Michael Kenny's brother at an Iron Maiden show before.
Matt has met, remember how we talked about I've only been to 6 shows and Matt's been to 7? Matt actually met him in the first show he went to for a matter of life.
Yeah, he had a sick handlebar mustache. I remember that.
Michael Kenny's brother at the old Iron Maiden show.
6 Degrees of Iron Maiden. I met Steve Harris's bass technician's brother. It's the closest to the band I've ever been.
I've never had the experience of meeting Michael Kenny's brother, but maybe someday we'll meet members of the band. But yeah, man,
they'll come do the podcast here. Nico come here and do the podcast.
Yeah, we always joke Nico will be like 86 years old, 90 years old, come and do the podcast with us. We'll be in our 50s or 60s. It'll be a good time. But Moonchild's amazing. I love the song. I love the atmosphere. My favorite line in the song is when Bruce says, "Hear the mandrake scream." I love that part. Another great thing about this is Adrian Smith and Bruce write this together. Adrian is that progressive. He gives that dash of progressiveness to the band, and this song showcases that.
Where Seventh Son was, or not Seventh Son, where Somewhere in Time was a futuristic sounding, a sci-fi sounding, Seventh Son kind of went into the opposite direction, but still just as progressive. You get a very like fantasy, minstrel, an occult feeling. You're looking back, you're telling a fantasy tale. So even though both of them are fantasy oriented or sci-fi oriented, they sound different, even though they're similar.
Another great thing about this album is we talked about philosophy and that kind of stuff on Somewhere in Time, like Matt's saying. There's a very similar feel to them with that kind of progressiveness, but this is a very, very philosophical album. This is it's based on a story, yes, but it explores the themes that have happened on Somewhere in Time in more intimate detail. It talks about, what does it mean to be alive? It questions religion again. It questions whether, what you do is right. And like we talked about as soon as we opened this up, it's like Star Wars and this idea of, to bring up history again, it's the idea of syncretism, which is like this Renaissance kind of belief that there was a guy named Giovanni Pico della Mirandola during the Renaissance. He was a Florentine Italian during the time of the Renaissance, which obviously, if you know anything about the Renaissance, Florence, Italy is like the birthplace of the Renaissance. And his philosophy was that you have the choice to be godlike and be good and be a human being or like an angel on earth, or you have the choice to be evil and corrupt and be basically the devil on earth. And if you look at some of the artwork from this album, you can see that. We'll talk about that later, but it's like I mentioned before. It's like kind of like that Luke Skywalker, darkness versus light.
It's that kind of feeling too that there's this. He was prophesized. The Seventh Son was prophesized to come, and even though you do have like a fate, and stuff is meant to be come into being, he still had a choice to become evil or good. So there's this kind of like juxtaposition between fate and free will that you get in this song too.
Absolutely, and I think that's a good point too, because we talked about this numerous times about how Iron Maiden is a very liberal band, and that showcases your ability as a human being, even though, if you think about it, there's a notion that we're all fated to exist in one way or another. There's a fate, there's a reason why we're born, but we have a choice to be what we want to be. And so it's a very liberal and independent. It's like we've mentioned with Somewhere in Time, it's a very personal album. There's stuff on here that touches on personal things, but they kind of put like a fantasy twist on it.
Yeah, just talking about the song Moonchild, though, is that in Somewhere in Time, they started using synths, and in Moonchild, you get that right away, that synths that come out, and they're just kind of taking that to the next level. They're progressing in a more progressive sounding music, and I think that's, part of what Adrian Smith brought to the band was he liked that progressive sounding stuff, and he was trying to drive the band more into a progressive sounding area. And I think the band went along in this album more than it did with Somewhere in Time. Bruce didn't write anything on Somewhere in Time, but on Seventh Son he writes multiple writing credits.
Yeah, on Seventh Son, I was just going to say that, and you mentioned it. Bruce writes basically half the album. He has 4 writing credits on here. So from going from writing nothing on Somewhere in Time to completely recharging. Another thing about that recharge is, this is another thing we should know. Up to Power Slave, they had been coming out with albums every year. 1980 was an album, 81 was an album, 82 was an album, 83 an album, 84 an album. Between that huge tour they did with Power Slave and the World Slavery Tour, they took a 2-year break to create Somewhere in Time, which came out in 86. And another 2-year break to create this album, which came out in 1988. So they realized they need to start taking care of themselves a little bit more and maybe slow down a little bit and have some time to process things. So we start to see a little bit more time between albums now. And that gave them time to recharge and, like Matt said, give Bruce time to put his creative input in this album, writing 4 songs. So
yeah, and Bruce writes, some really great songs this album. And you can kind of see Bruce is finding his voice, and these songs going forward are kind of similar to what he ended up writing on his solo stuff. Like you look at Chemical Wedding. This is similar to sounding to that kind of album. It has a similar feel, a progressive feel. It's a themed album, and that's kind of his Seventh Son.
Absolutely, and I think that you mentioned that kind of alchemical, occult kind of thing. Moonchild, I don't know whether it has any relation to this or not. A British occultist named Aleister Crowley, very prominent in British culture, he's well known. He was an occultist, created his own religion. Some people say he was the Antichrist. Some people say that he was evil. And it could be, maybe he thought he was the seventh son of a seventh son. Maybe his idea and his religion was called Thalamia. He believes he was fated to save the world or to show people the way on this. So, very interesting. And he has a book called Moonchild, which is what the song is called too. I don't know if it's based on that, but it's pretty relatable to that. So
yeah, no doubt that this album's the most philosophical work that they've done, maybe to date in the band.
What about Infinite Dreams?
I mean, this song is probably like, it may be the most philosophical song they've ever done. We were just talking about that. It is probably one of the best lyrical songs that they've ever written. I know it for a long time is one of your favorite songs. I'm sure it still is.
Oh, Infinite Dreams, man, is up there for me. One of the greatest lyrical songs I think they've ever done. Just the lyrics in the song are incredible. My favorite part of the song is when it starts to get really heavier towards the middle part. I mean, it kind of stays pretty much the same throughout, but then it gets really, really heavy. And then the ending just wraps back into it.
Those lyrics, yeah, I'm just looking at the lyrics at the end. There's got to be more to it than this, or tell me why do we exist. I'd like to think that when I die, I'd get a chance another time, and to return and live again, reincarnate, play the game again.
And Bruce just keeps saying it. He's like, again and again. And it closes and he goes, and again.
I mean, that might be... That's some of the best lyrics that Steve's ever wrote.
Absolutely.
Period. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, we ranked... I think we did a 10-song ranking of like our favorite lyrical songs Iron Maiden's done. I think this was like number 2 or 3.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be. Listen to that. We talked about the concept of philosophy. It talks about, and I talked about this earlier, religion. What are we here for? I mean, like, what's it mean to be a human being? What is our destiny? What is our fate? Are we fated to be something that we're never going to be able to attain? Can we ever find that? What are we supposed to do?
Yeah, you can really hear like Steve talking through this song. Like we do say this is a concept album, but this song could have been on like almost any album. Like I like the line, "You tell me you're an unbeliever, spiritualist. Well, me, I'm neither," and that kind of like sums Steve up personally, like what he believes. That Steve's not an atheist, he's not agnostic, but he's not a spiritualist either. He's kind of he believes in something that he thinks there's more to this world than what we can see with our eyes, but he also doesn't necessarily think that anybody knows the answer in terms of like having a religion or a Bible or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that...
Which is similar, like, honestly, it relates to me and my own feelings.
Yeah, same. I mean, like I said, I'm kind of a syncretic. I don't really know what it is, but I believe that there's something, but I don't know what it is. And I like the line, too, where he says, "Would you like to know the truth of what's out there that have the proof? To find out just which side you're on, where would you end? In heaven? Or in..." And Bruce goes, "Hell," and just holds that note. Mm-hmm. And that explains that whole Luke Skywalker mentality that we were talking about earlier, the whole fate, the whole good versus evil, the whole which side are you on? Are you going to go to heaven or are you going to go to hell? What's your choice?
Yeah, I'm like looking at the lyrics, man. We should have just read the whole lyric and just went through it. Like this line, like, "I rather like the restless nights. It makes me wonder. It makes me think. There's more to this. I'm on the brink. It's not the fear of what's beyond. It's just that I might not respond." I mean, like that, like, you ever wake up in the middle of the night and just stare at the ceiling and think? I mean, that's what you think about in the middle of the night. Like, you just start wondering about stuff. It's incredible.
It is. The song is lyrically amazing. I love it. I love the song. This actually might be my favorite song on the album, just because of the sheer emotional and personal quality it has about life that it sheds light on. I love it. I'll say it now. I mean, it's my favorite song.
Yes, Steve really knocked it out of the park with this one. He did a great job. It's hard for me to argue that it's not like, it's definitely the best lyrical song on the album, and it's hard to argue that it might not be the best song on the album. Period.
Absolutely. Another great thing about we didn't really mention Moonchild or Infinite Dreams. The solos on this are amazing.
Oh, I missed out on the Moonchild solo. Dave's Moonchild solo is It's one of my favorites when he does that tapping, and he just goes like he goes from tapping right back into picking, and you don't even like hear the transition. He's just flying up the fretboard, and Infinite Dreams. I mean, with just another talk about the solo. You love it.
Yeah, man, I love the solo. It's unbelievable. Adrian Smith destroying. Shredding.
I will say Dave might have took a little step back during Somewhere in Time, but he comes out in the seventh song, and he's like,
yeah, and I was just right back. That when you said Moonchild Band, because Adrian wrote the song, and I think Dave's solo in that. It's just ridiculous.
I don't think anything could follow that. No offense to Adrian, but nothing could follow that Moonchild solo.
That tapping where Dave, like Matt just said, when he goes into like a tapping thing and like a legato, and then back into staccato picking or whatever, it's a staple that comes after this. You can see that in the Sign of the Cross solo. You can see it in a lot of later solos. Yeah, he actually does it a little bit on the Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner solo too, but it's like to a point here where it's like even more perfect.
Yeah, Dave doesn't tap very much during soloing, but when he does, it's like so fast and clean. It's awesome.
And like Matt said, maybe he was trying to, because we talked about on the last album, Somewhere in Time, Adrian has that tapping solo and Caught Somewhere in Time. He has the tapping stuff with a little bit in Wasted Years. He does a little bit in Strange and Strange Land. Maybe Dave's like, I can do that too. What about Can I Play with Madness?
I'll just say it's my least favorite song on the album. I'm burnt out of Can I Play with Madness. I don't really care if I ever hear it again, honestly. When we saw them in the Somewhere Back in Time tour, every song on that whole set list was amazing except for Can I Play with Madness. I did not really care for it. I mean, I would say even when I'm at the shows, I'll sing along to Can I Play with Madness. I'm not saying I don't enjoy it, but it's the most simplistic song that I think the band wrote up until this point in the Bruce era. There's really not much to it. I mean, it's just...
Yeah, I agree with you.
Lyrics aren't inspiring. It's not real inspiring to me.
It is, to be honest...
It's catchy as shit, though.
It is catchy. It's great. And to be honest, I don't want to say the band's commercial. I've never said it about the band. But this song is maybe where Steve was thinking like, oh man, we're getting a little commercial here. This is kind of poppy sounding a little bit. I don't know if I want to do this anymore.
It is, yeah.
And that's kind of why, arguably, maybe he decided to get back to that gruffy stuff on No Prayer and Stuff to Come, which I don't think worked, but...
I don't know, some of that stuff was real catchy, too, on those albums we'll talk about in the future. Like, Holy Smoke was pretty mainstream kind of sounding song. Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter was.
But I agree with you. Can I Play with Madness? I like it. I like the video. I think it's different. I think it's a completely different thing. But at the same time, like you said, man, I mean, it's probably the weakest song on the album.
Yeah, we've seen the song 3 times live, I think. 2 shows on Somewhere Back in Time, then once on the Made in England. And
the thing that saved this song from being completely like unlistenable is the concept around it. Because this is a concept album, they talk about prophets staring at his crystal ball. Can I Play with Madness? There's no vision there. Oh, am I going insane? What's going on?
Yeah, it fits the album. It fits the thing.
Exactly. If it was like, let's say, out of the context of Seventh Son, and it might have been on Somewhere in Time or even like a later album, I don't think it would have the same. Because it's on this album, it's a good song. If it was on another album, I think it would be maybe one of the weaker songs. I don't think it would kind of gel.
Yeah, I agree with that. But that being said, it is the like quintessential like short rocking pop song that they've come to write in the future. Exactly. It's kind of it kind of reminds me. I mean, I guess it is in the vein of like a Wicker Man or Wildest Dreams or something like that. Like it's just a quick rocker. Some people like that. Some people don't like the Maiden. They think it's too bloated. They're like longer songs. Mm-hmm. And they like the shorter Iron Maiden songs. So maybe that's like your thing out there.
The Evil That Men Do.
Evil That Men Do is one of my favorite songs off this album. And I think it's a song that, like, if you can introduce Iron Maiden to, maybe you have a girlfriend out there that wants to get into Iron Maiden, The Evil That Men Do is probably a nice song to introduce to somebody that doesn't know a lot about Iron Maiden or that kind of music. They think they're like a heavy metal band. They're going to be like growling or whatever people get picture in their head of like what heavy metal is. And you play The Evil That Men Do for them, and it's like a song that has like awesome lyrics. Just another, I think this album, like just like sitting here thinking about it, I think this album, along with Somewhere in Time, another thing that is like really jumping out at me is like lyrics are just awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Lyrically, this is one of their strongest albums, if not the strongest. I mean, it's up there. I think later there's some stuff that they do that's really, really great lyrically too. But as far as the 80s are concerned, this might be one of the best lyrical albums they have done, like Matt said.
Love is a Razor and I Walk the Line on that Silver Blade. I mean, one of the best. I mean, Like, the other album I think about that has those kind of imageries is, like, Revelations or something like that. It's kind of that same kind of feeling to me.
Eyes reddened with the slaughter of innocence.
Yeah, I mean...
I love it.
But I will pray for her. I will call her name out loud. I would bleed for her if only I could see her now. I mean, like... I mean, just like sitting here, like, looking at the lyrics, I mean, circle of fire, my baptism with joy that end, it seems. The seventh lamb slain, the book of life opens before me, and I will pray for you. Someday I may return. Don't cry for me. Beyond is where I learned. I mean, like, what great lyrics. I mean, for a heavy metal band to be writing, like, lyrics that awesome is, you don't see that very often.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. I mean, it's... Another great thing about this song is the fact that it really plays a lot into the album cover, which we'll talk about later. This is really... You have to... If you want to understand... Because Seventh Son was Seventh on the album cover, people look at it and like, what is going on this cover? If you really want to understand that, I mean, listen to The Evil That Men Do. There are a lot of hints about the album cover on that, and I just said one of them. The book of life is on there, and he says, "Beyond is where I learn." Eddie on the album cover of this one is in some kind of world beyond. He's in like a spiritual kind of astral world. So to understand that, you have to listen to that song. You'll see if you're talking about it when you look at the album cover. We'll talk about that later. But
one of my great memories of this song too is the Rock in Rio when they played. It's one of my favorite songs on that show. They did a great performance of The Evil That Men Do. Yeah, and the Eddie comes out during the song, and Janik fights him and all that. Like, there's like why I like this song so much is one of the reasons is that Rock in Rio DVD.
It's a great song, man. You talk about these short rockers and stuff, and you have Candlelight Madness, and then you get The Evil That Men Do, which is a little bit longer than Candlelight Madness, but The
Evil That Men Do is so beyond.
Blows.
I mean, the lyrics, the music, the guitars, the solos. I mean, everything is better.
It's far superior than Candlelight Madness, and it's kind of like it's kind of like that tandem thing we talked about before with like Aces High and 2 Minutes to Midnight, Somewhere in Time and Somewhere in Time and Wasted Years. On this, you have Moonchild and Infinite Dreams, arguably, or like that concept. But if you're looking at like 4 songs in a row, you got Moonchild, Infinite Dreams, Candlelight Madness, The Evil That Men Do. The Evil That Men Do and Candlelight Madness are kind of similar in like the subject matter and what they talk about in the song, but like Evil That Men Do just slays the concept more effectively. It's I mean,
we saw it live at the Made in England show, and it was awesome. Like, I mean, I never get sick of hearing The Evil That Men Do.
Yeah, The Evil That Men Do, much like Matt said, is one of the songs you can listen to over and over again. Candlelight Madness is it's good, but it doesn't have
that lasting appeal. Yeah,
it doesn't have lasting quality, and it doesn't. What about the title track, Seventh Son of the Seventh Son?
This is in the vein of their epics. This is the Tame of Land of the album, or the Ryan and the Ancient Mariner of the album, the Alexander the Great of the album. But instead of it being the last song, it's in the middle of the album here. And this is really where you get the full story and the concept of the album is in this song. And I like this song a lot, but it's not my favorite out of the epics that Maiden did in the 80s, personally.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. I think it's really, I mean, it's amazing. We talked about this in earlier stuff with like Phantom of the Opera, Run the Ancient Mariner, like Matt said, Hallowed Be Thy Name, all that kind of stuff, Tame of Land, Alexander the Great. This idea of shifting between different stages and structures and time changes or whatever, it's very, very, very prevalent in here. And this is one of the greatest instrumental pieces between those different bridges that they've done.
It is the most like Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner song they've ever done. It's the most like that.
Yeah, it is the most like that. Rhyme, obviously, we think is a little bit better. But Seventh Son of the Seventh Son has a magic to it. It has a special connection of a concept. But I would argue, in regards to that, it's epic and it's great. The only thing that is, we talk about this all the time, how Iron Maiden don't stick to what other people think. They want to go do what they want to do, and they're going to do it. I think the reason why this, as an epic, isn't as powerful as the other stuff is because they have to stick to the concept. So they don't have the liberty to go out there and like write a song about something. They could have easily made this about Aleister Crowley, and it could have been like maybe a little better. But
that's an interesting debate. Is that we can have, because this is the title track of the song, is that does having a concept on an album elevate the album, or does it limit the album? Because it kind of has both effects.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're gonna write an album, like Steve said, and I think they mentioned this on the DVD, Nico said, this is the first time we've ever done a concept album. It's about Seven Sons, about premonitions, all this kind of stuff. And I think Bruce mentions, you have to follow the concept of the album slavishly, he says. You can't just go off on a tangent and write something about, like, World War II or something in literature. If you're going to do this album, you have to do it 150% vested in the idea of the seventh son of the seventh son, about clairvoyance, about premonitions. That's what the song's about. So I argue that it's a...
So you think it limits them?
It can be limiting in some ways. I think by no means is Seventh Son a horrible song. Seventh Son of Seventh Son is a fucking great album. Don't get me wrong. It's amazing.
But I think on the flip side of that is that if you have a really great concept album, you can almost have a transcendent album where you take the songs individually and they're not as great as when you listen to the whole album start to finish, because you get the whole story, that they almost add up to more than what they equal. And you can get that with Seventh Son. If you really like Seventh Son, if that's your favorite album, then you view it that way, as that you get almost 50 minutes of one story. You get more than you would get if you listened to 8 songs or 7 songs that were just about World War II, and one's about sword fighting, one's about a poem. That you get more out of it if it's a concept. So you kind of get both. That it is limiting, that you can't write about anything you want, and that'd be frustrating being a musician. But then on another side of that, you can write something that's a little transcendent.
Exactly, and I think it depends, like you said, about being a musician. If you want to write a concept album and you want to have one theme and you want people to listen to that theme, you're still doing what you want to do. But like we mentioned earlier, this is a very progressive thing. This is the only thing they've ever done. This is experimentation at its finest, and it turned out to be phenomenal. I know a lot of people out there who love Seven Son of Seven Son. Some people think it's the greatest album they've ever done.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of saying, that if that's your thing, then this is your favorite Iron Maiden album. And I think this song, just getting back to the song Seven Son, is that it's another one that has lyrically, it's really great.
Absolutely.
And then you watch the progress he makes, the good and the evil, which path will he take? Both of them trying to manipulate the use of his powers before it's too late. And you kind of get this... and you get this fight between good and evil, which is kind of prevalent through the whole album. And they said the other concept is fate versus free will. It was fate that the Seventh Son was born, but he has the free will to choose if he's good or evil, and they have these both sides kind of pulling them in each direction.
So it shall be written. So it shall be done.
Today is born the seventh one, born of woman, the seventh son, and he in turn the seventh son. He has the power to heal. He has the gift of second sight. He is the chosen one. So it shall be written.
So it shall be done. I love it.
And then that. The reason why it kind of reminds me of Rhyme and the Ancient Mariners, then you get that slow part in the middle and the guitars, and then you get that explosion.
One thing I will say I love the song. Don't get me wrong, it's fucking incredible. The chorus parts of the song are a little.
If you want to say there's a weak part of the song, it is the chorus. He just repeats Seventh Son of the Seventh Son over and over and over.
Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. He says Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. Seventh Son of a Seventh Son.
It can be kind of annoying.
Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. Other than that, though, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's not a perfect song. I'm not going to sit here and say it's the best song they ever wrote, but it's cool, epic.
And that's kind of why it falters a little bit, because most of the other epics they've written up to this point are pretty perfect.
We're actually going to do a part 2 of this song where we talk about when we saw the Made in England tour. So we'll talk more about this song in the Made in England tour and what they do with it live, but that's for part 2.
The Prophecy.
I think the album's kind of top heavy. I think the first part of this album's my favorite part, and then after that, after Seventh Son's kind of the climax of the album, if you want to view it that way. Mm-hmm. And The Prophecy, to me, is a little bit weaker than the other stuff on the album. You kind of start to see that.
And who is this? Murray? Does Dave Murray write the song, right? I believe so. I think he's one of the co-writers of this.
See, Dave Dave is not the songwriter that, as we talked about previously, that Adrian is. Just out of the guitarist. Mm-hmm. And even nowadays with Janik's a far superior songwriter. Dave's songwriting's kind of his weakest spot as a musician. He's definitely just like better player than he is a songwriter.
My favorite part of the song, much on the opposite side of Seven Son on the Seventh Son, is the chorus. I prefer the chorus actually over the verses. I think the lyrics are good, but I love the chorus verses. I had there, life in my hands, and fate there, fortunes in my visions. No one believed in my true prophecy, and now it's too late. I love that. And then it goes into like the interlude. I love that part with Davey. That's awesome.
One of my my favorite parts of the song is actually the outro with the guitar. Yeah, that kind of minstrel acoustic guitar sounding stuff. I don't know. I guess Dave wrote that. I'd assume it's one of my favorites. My favorite parts of the song.
I love it, man. It maybe one of the weaker ones because of the way it's maybe like carried out or constructed. But
I'm not saying the song's bad because I don't think there's a bad song on this album.
Oh, me either.
But I think compared to The Evil That Men Do and Infinite Dreams of Moonchild, I don't think it's in Seven Son. I don't think it's up there with those.
Yeah, that's a great man. It's definitely not weak, but it's one of the, like you said, this album is very top heavy. It's one of the, you have all these epics up top, all the great stuff up top, and then you have kind of like really short rockers at the bottom. So it's going to sound that way.
Clairvoyant might be Steve's, along with Stranger in Strangeland, his most famous bass intro. That intro that he plays in the Clairvoyant is really, really cool.
Oh, you can hear the synths on this too, and the guitar stuff coming.
It's another song that I think that you can play for somebody that's not a metal fan or an Iron Maiden fan, and they get them into, especially probably like, a girl. They'd probably like this album. This probably be like an album that a girl would probably be more into than a guy, or more getting somebody into it more than you would a male friend or something. That it has a fantasy concept. It's the music's a little less abrasive. It's a little more, the lyrics are a little catchier. The story will draw you in more.
Absolutely.
I think it's an album that you can kind of get hooked on. I remember back in college there was a while there for like a couple months where I'd listen to this song almost every day, or this album almost every day.
I think you're right, and we talked about it before in so many podcasts we've done about the imagery, and if you're talking about a concept, I mean, what better way to convey imagery than through a concept album? An image of this kind of good versus evil, this battle. Whereas Somewhere in Time, we talked about previously, had this kind of total concept that was built within the artwork. On the other hand, this is an album with the songs that have a total concept. So, I mean, like Matt said on the previous podcast, imagery, this album will hook you in with its imagery and the way the stories are told, and especially the lines in the Clairvoyant. The lyrics in this are amazing. I feel the sweat break on my brow. Is it me or is it shadows? They're dancing on the walls. I love that line. It's fantastic.
I mean, just like, look how we're talking about this album compared to other albums that we've discussed about Iron Maiden, is that we can relate each song to the next song. We just did, we did Seven Son, and then we did The Prophecy, and now we're doing The Clairvoyant. We can kind of like, we're reading the lyrics, and you're following along. Like you're just seeing the story progressing and the themes progressing. It's so easy to talk about one song to the next. They just transition into each other so well.
Absolutely. I love Clairvoyant. Another thing I do want to mention, though, about this album is, like Matt said, it's very minstrel sounding and has a kind of folk element to it.
I think that's Bruce's influence on the band. Yeah. He said after Power Slave he wanted to do something different than heavy metal. Steve said no, but Bruce wanted to do like almost like a Jethro Tull kind of sound, and this, you can kind of hear it on some of the songs in Seven Son.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing I want to touch on is there are guitar solos in this album. They're great, but they're more like spacey in this. They're more like they're not the forefront. Whereas like Power Slave and even Somewhere in Time with Adrian, that was the forefront.
Yeah, or Peace of Mind. Peace of Mind's a guitar
Peace
album.
Of Mind, or even Number of the Beast to a certain extent. The guitars and the heaviness are the forefront. Like Matt said earlier, this album is about lyrics and it's about the story, and it's not focused heavily on that twin guitar attack as much,
Right.
which is interesting for the band who had amazing dual guitar attacks on Power Slave, and now it's kind of, then you have Adrian becoming a prominent force, and now you have, who's the MVP of this album? That's hard to say.
I think, like we were just saying about last album, the MVP was Adrian Smith, hands down, and the whole album was like Steve and Adrian, and that was it. There was no Bruce songs. There was no Dave. Dave didn't really have a lot of like really signature moments in that album, but you get back to Seventh Son, it's a band effort again.
Exactly. Here's the MVP. It's everybody.
I think it's whoever's writing these lyrics because they're awesome.
Oh, absolutely.
I think lyrically this album, like just looking to the lyrics for the Clairvoyant, just by looking through your eyes, he could see the future penetrating right and through your mind. See the future, see your lies, but for all his power, he could not foresee his own demise. That's my favorite line, my favorite part of the song there. Like, we're talking about our favorite parts of songs, and usually before it was like, my favorite part of the Duelist is the middle part, the interlude, instrumental part in the middle, or, your favorite part of, Strange in the Strange Land was the solo. And now we're talking about favorite parts of the song being lyrics. We've not done that so far, I don't think, in an Iron Maiden song that we've talked about, where our favorite parts were the lyrics. It's every song. We're like, oh, I love this lyric. I love this line. I love this line. Mm-hmm. Every song.
Mm-hmm. It's very, like we said, this is one of the most personal albums. It took everything very philosophical. We talked about it earlier in this podcast. It dives a lot deeper into what it means to be alive and have choice and to choose good or evil. It's a very... And if you're talking about it, I kind of want to... I know this is earlier, and I know we tend to jump ahead, but a matter of life and death, that idea of what are you going to do with your life? It's about living or it's about dying. That's kind of, introduced here.
I don't think lyrically there's another album that compares to it, to A Matter of Life and Death.
Exactly, and it's almost the same concept if you think about it.
Yeah, when we do A Matter of Life and Death, you're going to get the same thing where I love this line in the song, I love this line in the song. You don't get that on every album. Not that the lyrics are weak on the other albums, it's just that's the strong point of the album is the lyrics.
Only the good die young.
I think besides Can I Play with Madness, probably my least favorite song on the album. It's kind of a weak way to end the album, honestly.
Yeah, that's one thing I do have to say about it too. I agree with you.
I wish they would have ended the album with Seventh Son of a Seventh Son.
And put Only the Good Die Young in the number 5 slot, maybe.
Yeah,
I agree with you. The only thing that is good about... Oh, not the only thing that's good about The Only Good Die Young, but one redeeming quality it has from being, a song that kind of should have been probably somewhere else on the album is the outro at the very end is awesome because they go back in at Moonchild. They play the minstrel part, 7 Deadly Sins, 7 Ways to Win. 7 Only Paths to Hell. But they don't say the trip begins. They leave that out because the trip is over now. 7 Downward Strokes, 7 Bloody Hopes, 7 Your Burning Fires, 7 Your Desires, and the album closes. So that's cool to tie it in together and wrap it together.
It is. I just think that in terms of like weak songs, this is a weak song to me personally. I think it's kind of mediocre. But saying that, I do like some of the lyrics in the song. Time waits for no man, my future is revealed. Time waits for no man, my fate is sealed. So he's kind of like, he had that idea of, we were talking about like fate versus free will, and you kind of get this part in here where he says, my future it is revealed, my fate is sealed. That he didn't have that, like his fate was already written. So you kind of like see that battle between fate and free will, and fate won.
Absolutely, I think it's awesome. Actually, the lyrics in the song are actually really, really good.
Yeah, I just think musically the song's kind of weak.
Yeah, musically it doesn't have the same appeal. I think my favorite lines in the song are, "The moon is red and bleeding, the sun is burning black, the book of life is silent, no turning back."
Yeah. You kind of like I get that. We mentioned it earlier. I get that Bruce Dickinson Chemical Wedding feeling going this album. You kind of see where Bruce, when he made that concept album, I think he got his inspiration kind of from the Seventh Son album work and what he wanted to do with that album.
Another thing I find interesting about that is the line, "The book of life is silent, no turning back." I think that's funny because he's talking about death. This is a song about death, really. The book of life is silent. mean, that means the book of life is closed. Your life's over. You know, it's
I will say about this song is that it ties the album. It does tie the album together, even though it's not like my favorite musical song. But it says, "Is death another birthday? A way to kiss your dreams goodbye? Do the undead live within us and look through our eyes?" Is that kind of like reincarnation, or are we reborn again? Sort of feeling.
Yeah, I mean, lyrically, it's great. I mean, I love the whole lyric too. The verse where he says, "Walking on water are miracles, all you can trust. Measure your coffin, does it measure up to your lust?" I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, like I said, this is the first time we were like reviewing an Iron Maiden album. We're just like sitting here like reading lyrics because how awesome they are.
They are great.
Yeah.
And another line that's great is "Have a good sin." I love that. Have a good sin. It's like, you know what? Hopefully you enjoyed your life because you're out there sinning. Have a good one, you know.
Yeah, this album's a ride to listen to front to back. It's like there are some weaker songs on the album, but if you listen to it and you make it through the album and you follow the story and you read the lyrics, I mean, you can get a lot out of this album.
Absolutely, by no means a bad album. Now, I will say, I was talking to Matt about this earlier. I will say this: I know that this is a lot of people's favorite album out there. For me personally, I think it's I do a lot of research about Iron Maiden. I'm constantly looking at new stuff that comes out. I constantly read forums, and for a lot of people, this is the number one album they've ever done. I don't know. I tend to disagree with that personally. I think, like we talked about before, it's personal preference, but I think Seventh Son, the Seventh Son, gets a little hyped up because it is a concept album.
You think it's a little overrated?
Yeah, I think it's a little overrated. By no means do I think it's a bad album. I just think it's a little overrated. It's to be honest, it's kind of short. I mean, it's a short album. It's there's the epic on it is great, but it's not amazing like any of the other stuff they've done.
It's kind of like what I was saying earlier. If this is your thing, if this is what you like, if you like this kind of it's almost a mythology. Almost like you like those concept albums. You like that, then this is your thing. This is going to be your favorite album. If it's not really your thing, then, like you said, it's going to be, you're not going to get as much out of it as you would if it was.
And the thing that I would say about this is I would recommend to people is if you're going to listen to this album, listen to the entire album. This album, I would argue you can't. It's a lot harder on this album to pick out a song and just listen to it.
Yeah.
Than it is from anything else that Maiden's ever done before. I mean, you kind of have to listen to this from beginning to end to actually understand what it's about. Not that you can't take it song for song, but I think, like Matt said, the most well-rounded experience of enjoying it is to listen to it from front to back. So you have to do that in order to get 100%. Where I can take Around the Ancient Mariner and listen to that on repeat constantly. You can't really do that with this album and the songs on this album, I would argue. That's just my standpoint.
Yeah, there was like I said, there was a time when this album was my favorite Iron Maiden album for a couple months, just because I got really into it, the concept and the lyrics and all that. So I do understand where people come from saying it is their favorite Iron Maiden album. It's a valid album to have as your favorite.
Absolutely, and prose of this album, lyrically, probably the best lyrical album they wrote.
I mean, at least up to this point.
Up to this point.
Yeah, at least, yeah. Absolutely. If not ever.
Absolutely.
I mean, we just sat here and read lyrics over and over and over again.
Then again, like I said, it all depends on your preference. Is it really Iron Maiden to be a lyrical kind of band, or is it more about the guitarist? That's for you to decide. But look at that as a pro too. Every album they do is completely different. Much like I mentioned with Somewhere in Time, this album stands alone. It's something that's completely unique and completely different than anything I've ever done before.
Yeah, it has its own soul. It's its own entity. It stands on its own.
And I love it. I mean, I might sound like an asshole here for criticizing it and giving it some jabs, but I'm just giving it jabs in relation to the other stuff. I love Seventh Son. I'm like, much like Matt, I got into a phase where I listened to it for months and months too. I mean, it's an amazing album. So yeah. What about artwork? The cover. Let's start with the cover.
The cover of Seventh Son is probably my least favorite out of the Golden Era albums, and maybe besides Iron Maiden, the original album, this is probably like my least favorite of their cover artwork up to this point.
Actually, it's one of my favorites. Honestly, it's probably my fourth out of the five. Out of the 5 albums that came in the '80s with Bruce, it's probably my fourth favorite. I like Somewhere in Time the best, Power Slave, The Number of the Beast, Seventh Son. Peace of Mind is actually my least favorite cover art. I think it's unique. I think it really puts you in that kind of, like you mentioned earlier, and you read some of the lyrics, that realm of just astral. Where is Eddie? I mean, is he in his mind? Is he having infinite dreams? No pun intended for that. Like, is he in a dream? What is this? What is this torso of Eddie just floating there?
Holding his heart.
He's holding something in his hand. It looks like some kind of... Is it his stomach with, like, a creature in it? If you look closely at some of the stuff on the art, where his heart is, or where his heart's supposed to be, like underneath his ribs there in the spine, it kind of looks like... It reminds me of the Garden of Eden, like the apple of knowledge, the tree that Adam takes off the tree and gives to Eve. It kind of looks like that. It's like he...
well, I think it's that duality concept, the good and evil.
Exactly. And I think that the thing that Eddie's holding in his hand that's moving around inside of his body is the seventh son. I think that's just my take on it. I think.
So you think that's like an umbilical cord?
Yeah, I think it's an umbilical cord coming out of Eddie.
Oh, yeah, it does. Zooming in on it, I think it is a person.
I think that looks like a baby, and that's the seventh son that's coming out of Eddie. Like, he's the one who spawned that. But then if you look above Eddie's head, which is a flame, there's a picture of Eddie again with a face. Which, is he dreaming about this entire thing? Is this real? What is that thing above his head? It's him, obviously. It's Eddie above Eddie, but what is that coming out of his head?
I mean...
Is that his soul? Is that a soul? Is that his spirit? What is it?
Yeah, I think it's something like some sort of divinity.
Yeah, a little supernatural stuff going on. And another thing that's great about this cover is it's in the middle of like this frozen lake or frozen body of water, and then off to the left-hand side there's the Book of Life, which is closed. And like we talked about in The Evil That Men Do, they mention that, and they mention it in a little bit of Seventh Son, they mention it in Only the Good Die Young. And then there's ice sculptures around. It's like this frozen lake with a bunch of ice sculptures. And in the ice sculptures, I love this part of the artwork because you can see the number of the beast Eddie in the background. You can see all these different various incarnations of Eddie. Peace of Mind and his straitjackets there in a sculpture. And then you can see, it's like a past historical thing with all this stuff. Is Eddie... Where is Eddie? Is he, like you said, is it a spiritual thing? Is he... Where's he at? Where is Eddie?
It's kind of a similar concept what they did at the Somewhere in Time cover, is that you kind of see that they're alluding back to the previous Eddies, that they kind of have their own mythology now around the band, Eddies.
Exactly, and I love it. I think it's a great one of the full extended album art is phenomenal. I love it. I think it's
it's just it's not my thing, but like I can understand why somebody would really really like it.
What about the singles covers?
I think Play with Madness was the first single that was released from the album. So. Has the Eddie's head, and it's the I think it's a lobotomized Eddie with a a fist going through his entire head, and it's got like a corkscrew on the end or something, and there's nails, and it's pretty wild.
Yeah, there's a spoon above his head dripping something into his brain. It looks like they're taking some sound of liquid out of his brain, whatever that stuff is.
So, I mean, your guess is as good as mine what that's all about.
I think it's crazy. I mean, it just shows you that, madness. What is madness? What is madness? Are they, that spoon dipping into his head, are they taking madness out of Eddie's head? What is that?
I don't know.
I like it. I think it's unique. It's a little weird, but I mean, it's pretty cool. It's definitely unique and different. What about The Evil That Men Do?
Yeah, I mean, talk about getting even more out there. All these albums, this, starting with Somewhere in Time, you kind of got that all the album work and the single covers were all kind of similar. It had the same theme, and you're getting that again with the Somewhere in Time stuff. That it's all very theme oriented. And you got this Evil That Men Do album cover, and you have a devil on top of Eddie's head holding is that a contract? And you get the lobotomized Eddie again, and he's kind of a smoky creature, and it looks like he has one of the cyborg eyes.
Yeah, another thing that should be mentioned about this Eddie is he actually is the cyborg Eddie, just evolved. His hair's grown back, and he's kind of
But is that the lobotomized Eddie though?
It's all of them. I think it goes back to show you the evolution of Eddie, because Eddie was lobotomized. If you look at Live After Death, and if you look at Power Slave, he's lobotomized too. He has that lobotomy staple in his head, that little thing that holds his brain together. The only thing is, even in the Somewhere in Time one, he has the little thing in his head. He's just a cyborg. This one, he's evolved even more. So it's kind of like Eddie going through time. Now he's...
It's not. I don't know if it's so much through time, but it's through like dimension.
Exactly.
Like it's through you're going through like different spiritual planes, and you like I said, we had like Eddie through history, and we had Eddie through time. Now we're getting Eddie through dimension and different planes of existence.
Exactly. I like the Evil That Men Do single artwork. I like the little snakes coming out of his head. I like how his mouth's open and his mouth's actually a cage, and there's a guy trapped inside of it. And there's a bunch of fire around it. And the guy can't get out. I think that's pretty cool. I like that a lot. And the wings of the devil thing on him are like lightning. I think that's pretty neat.
Do you think that's like he signed, like he sold his soul? The evil that men do.
Yeah, the evil that men do. You know, don't sell your soul to the devil. You're going to get trapped. I think that's what it is. And Eddie's basically the trap. Eddie has snakes coming out of his head. There's a guy trapped inside of his mouth. Mm-hmm. There's fire. It's like, if you sell your soul to the devil, man, it's going to be hard for you. You're going to be in prison and you're going to be going to hell. I mean, that's basically what I take from it.
Yeah.
Now, there's two different versions of the Clairvoyant singles cover. There's a live version, which is very similar to the stuff that looks like Evil That Men Do, Kenneth Blood Madness.
We'll talk about that one first. It's got like Eddie with 3 faces, a couple eyeballs hanging out. I mean, it's pretty wild. It's probably the most wild Iron Maiden cover they've ever done.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And that corkscrew's back again, but it's like Eddie's mouth is on a corkscrew now. There's a space in between. Like Matt said, there's 3 faces. Eddie's tongue's sticking out. There's lasers coming out of his eyes on the one side. There's lightning coming out of his eye that's not Cyborg on the other side.
He's got his tongue's on fire.
Yeah, his tongue's on fire. It's I think it's interesting, too, that they kept the Power Slave Eddie with his eye covered in lightning and the Cyborg Eddie with his eye with a laser. Yeah. You get both of those on there, which is pretty cool. So I like it. I think it's different. It's unique. It's really... And another thing we talked about, how this album is around occult stuff. Maybe you're not supposed to understand what these mean. I mean, we're just like talking about the covers as much as we're talking about the lyrics. I mean, it's like, what is it about? What is it? I mean, it's...
Well, it's part of what the occult is about is that mystery.
Exactly.
And it's not that somebody's going to tell you what it means. It's about what it means to you and your own discovery of what it means.
And those three single covers are a prime example of that. Very, very, very not straightforward at all. Very ambiguous covers.
Yeah, we're kind of just looking at them like saying what we think they mean, and maybe it's not what they mean at all. Maybe you mean something different to you, and that's cool too.
Exactly, and the ambiguity is also present on the album cover as well. What about the Clairvoyant cover?
I mean, the actual one. That's one that has the Reaper in the background. That's through a lot of the Iron Maiden artwork. And that, to me, is more of a traditional Iron Maiden cover artwork that we've seen in the past. He's got Eddie looking into a crystal ball. It's definitely, reminds me more of, the Seventh Son theme of a clairvoyant looking at somebody's future.
Absolutely. I love that. I love how he has the Book of Life open. He's looking at the Book of Life. He can see, there's a baby or an embryo in the crystal ball. Eddie's in the crystal ball. There's fire on one side that represents evil, and then there's angel feathers or wings on the other side that represent good. There's 2 candles beside him. The one on his left side, and I think this is funny because Iron Maiden understand history. If you ever read anything about history, if you ever read any Latin, if you ever read anything like that, right? The left-hand side is considered evil, and the right-hand side is considered good. It comes from the Romans, okay? The left-hand side, the Roman word for left is sinistra. It's Latin, which means sinister. And that's where the devil is on the candle. It's on the left-hand side of Eddie. And on the right-hand side is an angel candle. That's why in schools, like in the United States, when you were writing with your left hand, they made you tie your left hand behind your back and learn how to write with your right hand because they considered people who used their left hand as evil people, witches or warlocks or whatever you want to call it. So I find it really fascinating why they put that on the left side. It's interesting.
You have to say the saying, being somebody's right-hand man.
Exactly.
That you want to be on the right side.
Exactly. You want to be on the right side of the law, the right side of whatever it is. You never want to be... Now, in other cultures, it means different things, but in, English culture and American culture and a lot of stuff that's influenced by that Roman culture, that's what it meant. So, I love it.
I think it's better than the...
I think it's better than the live version.
Yeah, definitely, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, man, what about listenability?
I mean, this album, like I said, not all these songs are great songs, are good. I don't care for Kenneth Blood Madness a whole lot, and I think the Prophecy's a little weak. But that being said, listenability on this album is pretty top notch. I mean, you have to listen to this album start to finish to get the full picture of the album. The songs, they go into one another, they transition into one another. This is, in a way, the most listenable Iron Maiden album in terms of being able to just transition from one song to the other.
Absolutely, and I think as Matt said earlier about limitation of concept versus exploration of concept, I think if you listen to this album in its entirety, like Matt said, it is one of the most listenable albums they've ever done, if not the most listenable. Production is fantastic too.
I mean, synths on this album is like, it's different synths than you got on Somewhere in Time, but in a way it's more prominent. It's more entwined into the music. It's not as glaring as it was in Somewhere in Time. It is, you can kind of see how they're being able to use the synths more effectively to add to the music.
Yeah, the synths and the keyboard's definitely more refined than this one. I think, like Matt said, it really plays more into the sound of the album too, with that minstrel occult kind of feel, versus the subject matter and stuff that was discussed and presented on Somewhere in Time. So, yeah, I agree with you with that. What are you ranking? With that being said,
see, we just did Somewhere in Time. I gave Somewhere in Time a 9.4 out of 10. I think I'm going to give Seventh Son a little bit less. I think I'm going to give it a 9.2 out of 10. I'm going to take it down a step.
I'm right there with you, man. I gave Somewhere in Time a 9.7 because I don't know, like I listened to the Somewhere in Time podcast and know why I said that. There's a lot of things about that album that resonate with me as a person, so that's why I gave it a pretty high score. But I'm going to give it a 9.3, just a 0.1 above, because I do still think it's up there, but it's definitely not. I mean, not our. I mean, not our. It's hard to say. I mean,
it didn't have those transcendent things about them. Like when we talked about The Number of the Beast, I mean, it was just like all this new stuff. It sounded so new, and it was all this like exciting stuff. And then Peace of Mind kind of like explored that even more. And then Power Slave, you kind of got the pinnacle of it. And then Somewhere in Time, it progressed into synths and to emotional music. And with Seventh Son, I don't know. I just didn't get that. I didn't think it was the progression that we kind of saw.
I agree, and I think what you just said. The thing about Seventh Son, we mentioned this. Seventh Son, in order to get the full scope of what it is, you have to listen to the album in its entirety. Sometimes, for some people, that's a great thing, but from what Matt and I have experienced with Maiden, our main highlights and our main focal points are on various songs and various parts of songs within that. This is, to understand Maiden, you have to listen to this album as a whole, and that really, if you think about it, there's only really one song on the album, and that's the entire album. It is one piece of. I mean, take Seventh Son if you want to take Seventh Son and just count it as one song, because you have to listen to it in concessionary. Otherwise, it doesn't have that feel or that flow. And I think that might be another reason that we talked about before with the limited scope of being able to go outside of a concept or a theme. So that's why it gets docked a couple percentage points from me and for Matt too. But that Seventh Son on the Seventh Son still amazing.
Yeah,
still B+, A- album.
It's downhill from here though.
After this, we really got
work cut out for us.
We got stuff to talk about, but it's not going to be as enjoyable or as fun for us. There are highlights. Don't get us wrong. There are highlights on those couple albums.
Yeah, we're still going to do the albums. We're still going to do the not so good ones. We're going to give our honest opinions of them.
But Seventh Son was a fine conclusion to the golden era of Iron Maiden. Very cool idea to end it on a concept. So,
and we'll do a part two of this. We'll do a part two of this podcast talking about our live experience, seeing the Maiden England show, and talking about the set and all that, and our story. Get a little story time. So grab your blankies next
very
podcast.
Fitting with the story time of Seventh Son. We got a little story to tell you after this. But hey guys, thanks for listening again. Please check out all of our previous episodes if you haven't already. We're very passionate about Iron Maiden. Iron Maiden is life for us. I mean, I know Seventh Son talks about religion, but Iron Maiden might be our religion. Really. Just kidding. But no, seriously, it is. But hey, 7 deadly sins, 7 ways to win. 7 holy paths to hell, and that's all I got to say for you. Until next time, guys, I'm Joe Labriola.
And I'm Matt Wagner.
Thanks for listening to the podcast of The Beast, A Matter of Life and Maiden. Appreciate it, guys. Take care.